All right, welcome everyone to this year's NNP Symposium. We are for the third year back at Central States with the hybrid event. So we have people here in person in Schaumburg, and we also have people watching live online through Zoom. So the symposium itself is sponsored by the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society, and our physical space here in Schaumburg is sponsored by Heritage. So thank you to both of them for making this possible. For this presentation, we have Jesse Kraft, who is the Resolute Americana Assistant Curator of American Numismatics at the American Numismatic Society in New York City. He focuses on coins, tokens, banknotes, and medals of both North and South America. So just a couple of reminders that if you've watched all of these presentations, you are sick of hearing by now. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. If you're watching online, you'll be able to send in questions in via text with a button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. If you're here in person, you'll raise your hand, like in any other presentation where we do a Q&A. Zoom also has captions now, so if you're having trouble understanding or hearing online, try clicking on Show Captions. We're not sure how well they're going to work for numismatics, but it's worth a shot. So that is all for me. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse for Mining for Sovereignty, Coinage of the Mexican War of Independence from 1810 to 1821. Let's make sure your audio is coming through correctly, and then I will get out of here.
Excellent. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Leanna. I really appreciate the introduction. Thank you, of course, to the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Educational Society for hosting this, and Heritage for hosting the physical space, even though I apologize that I'm not there physically. I'm still very much happy to be a part of this. So I'm going to kind of just jump right into this. As Leanna had said, my title is Mining for Sovereignty, Coinage of the Mexican War of Independence during the 1810 to 1821 period. Independence does not win itself. While the beginning of an uprising against a colonial power generally begins as mass frustration, resulting in local uprisings from extended periods of time under unwanted rule, immense amounts of resources and human exertion often go into a revolution from a colony to an independent state. Inevitably, these endeavors need financial backing. A key factor in the outcome of such revolutions is often how they were funded. In the case of Mexican independence, access to silver was often a primary factor in the tides of war. The Mexican War of Independence, fought between 1810 and 1821, saw the advantages of the royalists and the insurgents flow back and forth as silver mines and other sources of specie were won and lost. So on September 16, 1810, Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla, who we see here to the right, as well as some more modern coins where he is featured on. He was a Catholic parish priest in both San Felipe and Dolores, Nueva España, or Mexico. He ignited what became a dozen-year struggle to free the people of Mexico from their imperial rulers, Spain, who had colonized the land for about 300 years beforehand. Hidalgo led a massive but disorganized initial revolt. Estimates in the number of people that joined the rebellion topped 30,000 in less than a fortnight. Hidalgo's time as leader of the revolution was cut short, however, as he was captured and executed on July 30th of 1811, less than 11 months from his initial call for independence. In that time, however, he created a numismatic legacy. In less than 2 weeks after the beginning of the war, Hidalgo and his forces captured Guanajuato, an extremely important mining city located about 200 miles northwest of Mexico City. In early October of 1810, he was informed that the treasury in Guanajuato contained very little coined silver, but over $500,000 in silver bullion. With little other choice, Hidalgo turned a local ore-reducing plant into a makeshift mint. And by the end of that month, coins were ready for distribution. Interestingly, Hidalgo himself drew up the plans for the machinery. The only people around him with knowledge of how to operate the mint, however, were imprisoned counterfeiters. They were released from prison and worked at the makeshift mint, making near-perfect counterfeits of the coinage of Mexico City. It is interesting to note that once the royalists retook the city at the end of the following month, the machinery they found was so well designed that they actually sent the plans down to Mexico City and used those plans in the subsequent construction of mining machinery. This is one of the coins here, or this isn't necessarily one of the coins. Again, the coins that Hidalgo and his counterfeiters created were such nearly identical counterfeits that none are known today, or at least identified today. They're ostensibly exactly like the Mexico City Mint. So this could be one, or it could be an official one. So that's as close as we can get as far as a representation of one goes. After leaving Guanajuato, Hidalgo traveled northwest about 120 miles to Valladolid, where he was able to confiscate several $1,000s worth of silver objects, such as flatware and jewelry. He cast them into square planchets that weighed about 25 grams and stamped them with 8R for the value, 8 reales, and the letters PV for Provisional Valladolid. Today, there are supposedly none known, but when Albert Francisco Prado wrote his 1938 seminal work, Numismatic History of Mexico, which covered the pre-Columbian era up through the War of Independence, he had actually located one in the possession of a family who lived in Guanajuato at the time of the war, and he did not doubt its authenticity. This is the picture of the one that he came across, but it has since gone untraced. So if Hidalgo had captured arguably one of the most prolific mines in the history of Mexico's silver mining, why did he not begin mining himself? The answer lies in adequate and experienced labor. Mining was already an extremely hazardous occupation. The work was backbreaking, injuries and accidents were frequent, and in cases of death, the payout to the widow was a mere pittance. Usually just a percentage of what the miner was carrying at the time of death. The last thing that miners wanted to experience on top of these hellish conditions was a war. So many of them fled, while those who stayed often joined the cause rather than continuing to work in the mine. Between 1810 and 1812, silver mining really throughout all of Mexico had essentially come to a standstill. As early as 1811, the Viceroy Francisco Venegas, reported to the Royal Minister of Finance that as a result of the depredations of war, the income of the treasury of New Spain was expected to decrease by nearly 1 million pesos. That, combined with greatly increased cost of the military establishment of the kingdom, it would be clear that New Spain would scarcely be able to meet current operating expenses. It turned out that this was actually a gross underestimate. In reality, the decrease in revenues was much greater than he had anticipated, and the total income plummeted from 65 million pesos in 1809 to 49 the following year, and then a low of 43 in 1811. Despite this, these locations remained extremely important as war prizes, with the hope that the winning side would be in control of mining towns at the conclusion of the war. Without a constant workforce, many of the mines gradually flooded, in some not fully recovering its pre-war operations until the 1840s, decades after the war's conclusion. Once mining in Guanajuato began to recover in 1812, it was the royalists and not the insurgents any longer who held control over the city. Over the next 2 years, and then again at the end of the war, we could see here 1812 to 13, and then 21 to 22, royalist forces struck a number of 2 and 8 real denominations. This is intriguing because this mint did not exist prior to the war, but those who collect Mexican coins would be very, very knowledgeable of the mint and very used to Guanajuato coins. So despite its immense size, prior to the War of Independence, the only mint in all of Nueva España was in Mexico City. Just to give you a scale of what Nueva España is, it not only includes Mexico, which most people consider in their mind when they think of it, but it actually went all the way down and included pretty much all of Central America, all of the now American Southwest and California, and even went a few hundred miles north into what's today Alaska, and then all the way east to the Atlantic with Mexico. Even the Philippines and some outposts in Asia were actually considered politically a part of Nueva España. So geographically, it was huge. Miners, in particular, hoped for mines in other locations aside from the Mexico City Mint, primarily because of the cost, risk, and impracticalities of transporting ore to Mexico City. There had been earlier attempts to found mints in other cities, such as one is in Arizpe, which is the capital of the province of Sonora, all the way in the northwest corner of present-day Mexico. This was proposed in the late 1760s, or there's one also proposed in Guadalajara in 1761, and again in 1788, or even as early as 1583 in Zacatecas. Royal authorities had claimed that the existence of branch mints in the colony would detract from the glory attained and justly deserved by the Mexico City Mint. So that was their sole reason for not founding branch mints in Nueva España. In the earliest days of the war, it was realized that getting ore from the mines to the mint went from difficult to impossible. Silver, as the royalists knew, was integral to the war, however. Throughout the course of the war, 9 different provincial mints were created for the purpose of minting coins, largely to pay soldiers, buy supplies, and other related needs. These included Chihuahua, Durango, Guadalajara, Guanajuato, Sombrerete, Zacatecas, and then as well as smaller ones in Oaxaca, Valladolid, and Real de Catorce. None of these mints were officially sanctioned by the royal government, and in fact, even though they were helping fund the anti-Revolutionary War effort, the government had seriously contemplated shutting them all down in 1817. As I mentioned, Guanajuato is not the only royal provisional mint founded because of the war, nor was it actually even the first. The first 2 were established on the same day in Chihuahua and Durango on October 8, 1810, about 3 weeks after the war began. And this shows the pace at which the transport of ore to from the mines to the mint was disrupted. Of these 2, Chihuahua was the first to begin producing coins, however, without the use of machinery. Instead, they were cast, as you can see here, instead of striking them by using genuine Mexico City Mint coins to create the molds, but remove the original mint mark and added a CA for Chihuahua in its place. Additionally, as you can see to the left and the right of the bust, 2 counter marks were added, a T to the left, and then a crowned pillar of Hercules to the right. And the T stands for essentially for treasury, meaning that the treasurer had stamped off on it. It was not until 1814, after 4 years of operation, that actual dies and rudimental minting equipment could be procured. It is possible that no new ore or planchets were used to strike coins, as pretty much all of them have traces of cast undertypes and or the counterstamps of the original Chihuahua undertypes. And you can see that here, especially in the bust, you can kind of see two heads, almost 2 different mottos here, inscriptions, and then these counterstamps were actually on the original cast coin before it was overstruck. Regardless of whether cast or struck, only the 8 real denomination was struck. So there were a couple other denominations, but once they obtained actual minting machinery, it was only used to strike 8 real coins. And they were struck every year of the War of Independence, cast or struck from 1810 through 1822. The Durango Mint, also established on October 8, 1810, again through local ordinance and not through royal proclamation, began creating coinage the following year. However, the first coins struck here were of a different nature than the quote unquote normal right facing bust. Initially, from February to March 1811, so 2 months in early 1811, they struck coins that are now numismatically classified under Nueva Vizcaya, as that was written on the coins, but were struck at the same facility as the Durango coins. So in your Krause manual of world coins, you actually see Durango, and then later on you'll see the Nueva Vizcaya. They were struck at the exact same place, just using different sets of dies. But so numismatists classify them separately, even though they really should be together. The obverse of these coins show this. I'm sorry, none of them are really pretty looking. You know, it's very rare to find a pretty looking, so you might have to squint a little bit to see it. But the obverse of these coins show the Nueva Vizcaya coat of arms, which consists of two wolves with sheep in their mouths passing in front of an oak tree, flanked by palm branches, which you can see here, topped by a crown. The reverse, however, is very similar to the standard coin, showing the royal arms flanked by the pillar of Hercules. And as again, you can see by this image, quality control was lacking. The normal bust right coinage was no better. These, however, do have the DO mint mark, as you could see kind of at the 8 or 9 o'clock area on the reverse. And we're in an array of denominations from half real up to 8 reales, plus actually a copper 8th real coin. While the majority of coinage struck during the Mexican War of Independence was silver, followed by copper, gold coinage was also produced. Here is a gold 8 escudos coin struck at Guadalajara, while the mint struck 1/2, 1, 2, 4, and 8 real coins in silver. The 4 and 8 escudos here were struck in 1812, 13, and then 21, and are all very, very rare today. Another royal provisional mint includes that in Soberete, which operated with two distinct periods in 1810 and 1812. None of the coins minted here resemble the quote unquote normal colonial bust types and were much more crude in design. All of them bear the name Vargas for the superintendent of the mints, Fernando Vargas, and as a result, today are known as the Vargas issue by numismatists. There are two different types that correspond to the two different periods, both of which are in the same composition, but in the earlier types, the different components of the design are imparted with individual punches. So it's almost like a uniface coin that like Vargas, and then the date, and then the 3 at the bottom, and the 2 pillars that flank everything were actually different counter stamps that were then added to the planchet. While the latter type had the entirety of the design engraved into a die and struck, and that's what we see here is a die struck specimen dating from the 1812 period. Despite the short duration of time that the mint was open, over 1.5 million in silver was struck in all the silver denominations from half up to 8 reales. Ultimately, the Sombrerete mint closed because of its close proximity to Durango and Zacatecas mints, so it almost became redundant and was subsequently shut down. The Zacatecas mints operated throughout the entirety of the war, all the way from 1810 to 22, and struck silver coins of all denominations except for the 4 reales. There were 2 very distinct types, as we can see here, depending on whether the revolutionaries or the royalists controlled the mint. The revolutionaries broke from tradition in their design, and instead of a traditional bust like the colonial era or the coinage of the royalists in Zacatecas, the coinage portrayed the mountain, the silver mountain, with a flowered wreath, which you can see there, all within a beaded circlet, along with the inscription LVO and Moneda Provisionales de Zacatecas. The reverse of both the royalist and the revolutionary coinage, however, contained the royal crest and the famed pillars of Hercules, and both, surprisingly, were struck under the name of Ferdinand VII, even though one side was clearly very much against him. Of all the coinage struck out of the Mexico City Mint during the Mexican War of Independence. These, by those of Zacatecas, are by far the most prevalent, with about $17 million in silver struck in total. The revolutionary coinage is fairly rare and was only struck between April 15 and May 21 of 1811. So these mountain types are far rarer than the bust royalist types. Interestingly, the royalist coinage was so well struck and of nearly pure silver and of correct weight that they actually circulated at a premium over their face value and at a premium over the Mexico City coins even. Perhaps the most famous coinage from the Mexican War of Independence is the Sud coinage, or Sud, which is Spanish for south. This coinage is cataloged under Oaxaca, but is really issued from a traveling mint that struck these coins in several places and over a fairly far geographic range. While all the coins that we looked at thus far were from places north of Mexico City, all of these were struck south, hence the Sud. In early 1811, Hidalgo, who we met earlier in this presentation, had instructed Jose Maria Morelos y Pavon, who is also a Catholic priest, to raise an army in the south. So these are technically, quite literally the Southern Army coinage. By May of that year of 1811, a distinct coinage, as we see here, for the army was conceived. Additionally, the distinctive M with a circle on its left leg, its meaning was shrouded in mystery. They weren't sure if it meant Mexico City or anything along those lines, or Mexico, but it's actually the monogram for Morelos, that priest in the south. A major discrepancy of these coins, however, was that they were of silver denominations ranging from 1/2 to 8 reales, but they were largely struck in copper. Not all of them, but largely. The coins were considered, quote unquote, promissory currency, with the intentions to redeem in silver at the conclusion of the war. In October of 1812, Morelos took over Oaxaca, and that's when these silver coins were struck. Again, I mentioned that most of them were struck in copper, however, not all of them, such as this one that was struck in 1813. The vast majority of silver Sud coinage was largely struck around December of 1812 and into early 1813, when Morelos took Oaxaca and was able to loot a fair amount of silver, which he then coined. Once that supply was exhausted, he most likely reverted back to copper coinage, and this is known because by mid-1813, while in the course of laying siege to Acapulco, Morelos is known to have struck some copper coinage just outside of the city to help pay for troops. Another distinctive type coin that was also struck in Oaxaca, albeit by Lieutenant Antonio Gonzalez Saravia in 1813. And like the revolutionary Sud coinage, these were actually royalist coins. Two distinct types include cast coins or struck coins. The struck coins, however, are generally of poor craftsmanship, as they were struck on inadequate machinery. The obverse of these coins show the cross of the Order of Christ, with a small lion and castle in the upper quadrants, and then FO and 7O in the lower quadrants for Ferdinand VII. These only exist in silver 1/2, 1, and 8 real denominations, and the largest type generally have counterstamps on each side, as seen here. You see the Pillars of Hercules and then A. In Valladolid, which is now Morelia, Mexico, the revolutionaries repeatedly attempt to overtake the city, both because of its own sources of silver, but also because of its strategic propinquity to Guanajuato, Guadalajara, San Luis Potosi, Puebla, and Mexico City. It's kind of centered in between all of those, and all locations of silver mines and other sources of finance. The semi-isolated nature of the region did not allow monetary inflow of coinage during the war. So they resorted to creating their own 8 real coins that we can see here. Some of these coins later came into the hands of revolutionaries with counterstamps added. The piece picture here is not counterstamped, so is one of the unadulterated specimens. All right. The final piece that I would like to briefly discuss is the coinage issued by the Supreme National Congress of America, also known as the Zitacuaro Council, which was formed by revolutionaries with Rayon and Morelos acting as distinguished leaders. This was the prototypical government for Mexico independent of Spanish crown. So this is almost like the Continental Congress of North America. This included the creation of a first draft of a constitution. While not exactly the same, those who collect a U.S. coinage these would be akin to a Fugio cent, essentially, which was struck before the creation of the federal government, but still by a national government. Unfortunately, without a singular and large source of silver, the council was underfunded and never succeeded in getting total recognition from the heads of the armed factions of the revolutionaries, though they did receive political support from many governors and mayors throughout Mexico. So in conclusion, access to silver, or in some cases copper and gold, were absolutely vital to the funding of the Mexican War of Independence. Towns situated around silver mines were considered strategic and indeed war prizes. Because of the unsettling nature of war, avenues of silver that in some cases for centuries had been channeling silver to Mexico City were disrupted and completely new mints were founded. At first unofficially, but later added to the official roster of Mexican mints upon independence. Thank you. So as Liana had mentioned, there's now a Q&A section. So I will stop sharing my screen and happy to take any questions.
All right. So if you are watching online, just click Q&A at the bottom of your screen and you can send in questions. We will not be reading off your name unless you put it in the body of your question. So it'll be shared anonymously unless you specify that you want your name on it. Otherwise, let's open it up to the room first. Nope. All right. What do we have online?
A couple questions. Number one, do you know the fate of the 1810 Guanajuato's counterfeiters?
Well, I don't know the ultimate fate of them. I presume that they're no longer with us today, but I do know that they were released, for the sole purpose of creating those initial coins for the revolution. I presume that once, because it wasn't long after that Guanajuato then became a royalist place again, and so they either fled or were recaptured. I presume that they tried to flee, if nothing else, but I don't know the exact fate.
Yes.
Were any of these 8 real pieces recognized by the United States as legal tender?
No, not so much. That doesn't mean that they didn't circulate, but they weren't. And even after independence was won, it was usually continued to be actually the Mexico City and Potosi colonial types that were recognized in North America, in the United States. So you don't really get too many of even the independent types. And that was actually, it's a completely different story, but part of the downfall of the Spanish silver that circulated in North America, because by the 1840s, 1850s, all this early colonial type is getting worn and almost blank planchets again and weighing 10, 20, 30% below their actual value, and had begun to get revalued themselves, where, you have a quarter dollar or 2 reals piece, only has 20 cents worth of silver. So people actually began revaluing them. And then, with the 1853 Mint Act, and then, of course, ultimately the 1857 Mint Act, most of those were melted. So it was this kind of disruption with the Mexico War of Independence, and then kind of there being so many different types of independent coins coming out of South America, Latin America, that dissuaded the United States government from making any of them legal tender. Again, that doesn't mean that they didn't circulate, but only the colonial types were legal tender.
Right. We have others online.
That's a question. Any comments about the Monclova's mint in Coahuila, Mexican state?
No. Not enough to say anything of value about it. I apologize.
Then there's a comment here about the Sombre Nete mint in Zacatecas. The director of this mint was Jose Maria Vargas Machuca, not Fernando Vargas. There are no sombreretes 2 reales coins known. It's a Prado's mistake.
Okay. So again, all right. So no 2 reales coins.
Okay.
And there are, I do know that like in the Krause manual, there are some that Prado didn't know, but now we do definitely know about them. The opposite's often true. Sorry, I cut somebody off.
You're good. Okay.
Yes, I missed the very first part, so I'm asking a question that you already answered. Please forgive me, but are there any coins from the period before 1811 that would be genuine as far as you could speculate?
None that I know that are known. From what I understand, all the 1810 pieces come from that essentially a counterfeiting operation. So if any of those still exist, they've blended in with the official type, and aren't necessarily known.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said that the royalists also made coins. Was the Mexico City not sufficient to volume-wise to pay the soldiers, or what? Why did the royalists also? Why did they just have the Mexico City mint?
So I believe the question is why did the royalists found mints, and why didn't they use only the Mexico City mint? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Is because the Mexico City mint still did continue to operate. They struck official coins that, for all intents and purposes, looked just like the 1809 and 1808 and all for all the time before that. But it was the problem of getting silver from these specific locations down to Mexico City and then striking them and paying the soldiers in these areas. So a lot of these areas were hotbeds of revolutionary, mindset, but they couldn't get the silver down to Mexico City and then back up again. So they had to found mints in these more remote locations in order to pay for the revolution. And even once, and the same goes for the royalists, just because they had this royalist mint down in Mexico City, they were still having problems getting the silver down and then back up to pay for the troops in those locations.
Okay. Do we have more online?
Yeah. Did the 8 reales square coin, has it surfaced lately? Prado mentioned it, and he believes it's genuine, includes a photo, which is the same one you used.
I did hear about that, but it's possible that it surfaced, and I'm not sure if it's the exact same one that Prado had identified, or another one that's come up. From what I understand, when he found this piece in 1938 during his research, he did not necessarily acquire it, but it was part of this family's, estate or collection or whatever you want to call it, and took photographs of it, and then, had to part ways with it at that point.
Okay. Anyone else?
Another one online. What does the revolutionary abbreviation LVO stand for?
I wish that this question wasn't asked, because I had that in my head, and then in my little script, I had parentheses, find out what this means, and then I did, and never wrote it down. So I apologize. It's somewhere out there. The answer is out there, but I apologize that I can't give it right now.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, one more here. Did any of this coinage end up in China or go to the Chinese trade?
I'm sure that some of it did. I don't know off the top of my head if any. I know in the A&S collection we don't have any with Chinese chop marks. I don't think. I think everything is either before the revolution or after. And we actually did just receive, as a donation, a fairly comprehensive collection of chopped mark coins of different undertypes. There's 607 pieces that even went, year by mint. And I don't think that there were any revolutionary pieces in there. It was all pre or post. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. But if they did, they would be relatively rare.
Right. Anyone else? I don't see anything else in the room. Do we have anyone else online? Glenn?
I was just typing LVO in the numismatic portal, and all I can say it's a very common acronym, but I'm not immediately seeing what it means.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. We'll check back in with you one more time before we all leave to see if you found it. But thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, Jesse, for participating.
No, thank you. Yeah. Oh, here we go. LVO means Lo del Visitador de Occidente. Thank you, Jim.
So all of these presentations are being recorded. The recordings will be available in about 2 weeks. If you would like to get an email when those recordings are available, you can either sign up to our email list on the symposium website. It's nnpsymposium.org. On the homepage, if you scroll down, there's a place to subscribe. Or if you're here in person, we have a piece of paper at the back of the room. Buy the plastic cups where you can put your email and we'll get you added. And Len has something to say.
One last question that just came through. On the Chihuahua coins, did the right-hand countermark of the Pillars of Hercules have a pomegranate below?
I know they may have. I can't quite recall off the top of my head. There's quite a few counter stamps, and then these. Another thing I should say is that all the coins that we looked at are only 2 of 6 different varieties. Then there's like 2 whole different series of counter stamped, whether it's royalist or insurgents. So these are really just like the fully struck coins. So if you're interested in counter marks, there's a whole wealth of different coins that we collected in that regard.
Great. Then our next presentation will be Jeff Garrett at 1:30, speaking on the Great Kentucky Hoard of U.S. Gold. So I hope you'll all join us back here for this one. Otherwise, have a good day.
Thank you.